The first time Kieran Vale smelled her, the entire room froze. The Alpha King didn't need to raise his voice. His presence was enough. Every subordinate in the pack hall bowed instinctively, their heads lowered, breaths shallow. But his sharp amber eyes weren't on them. They were on her. Seren Dusk, the Omega who dared to walk into the Alpha King's territory with her chin tilted high, leather jacket half-zipped, and that defiant look that made even Betas flinch. He caught the faintest trace of her scent, something sweet but laced with danger, like smoke curling through roses. It hit him hard enough that his jaw flexed. Omegas didn't usually smell like rebellion. And worse, she carried another Alpha's mark. Ronan's, his brother's. Kieran's fingers twitched at his side, a slow exhale leaving his chest. His control was legendary. No one had ever seen him break it. But as she stopped a few steps in front of him, eyes steady, pulse visible at her throat, he wondered if control was about to become a luxury he could no longer afford. "Seren Dusk," he said, voice calm, low, dangerous. "You were supposed to stay out of my territory." She tilted her head, her braid slipping over her shoulder. "Funny. I didn't realize breathing was something I needed your permission for." A few gasps echoed from the guards, but Kieran only stared. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, but something close. "You wear my brother's bond mark," he said quietly, his gaze flicking to the faint crescent-shaped scar just above her collarbone. "You should know better than to provoke me." Her hand went to the mark, fingers brushing over it as if it burned. "That mark doesn't mean I belong to anyone." Kieran stepped closer. Not enough to touch her, but enough that she could feel the hum of dominance rolling off him. "It means you belong to him. And by extension," he paused, eyes narrowing, "to me." Serene's lips parted, her body tensing, instincts screaming to submit. But she didn't bow, didn't flinch. Her heart was racing, and the sharp scent of her fear mixed with defiance until it filled the air like static before a storm. He noticed, and he liked it. "Too much. Careful," she whispered, meeting his eyes. "You don't get to claim what's already broken." For a second, just one, Kieran's mask cracked, because she was right. There was something shattered in her scent, something beneath the steel. He recognized it, maybe because it mirrored his own. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor, heavy, familiar. Kieran didn't look away from her, even as Ronan appeared in the doorway, breath unsteady, eyes immediately locking onto Seren. "Enough," Ronan said tightly, his alpha tone cutting through the tension. "She's here because I told her to be." Kieran's gaze flicked between them, and a slow, dangerous smirk curved his mouth. "Then you've made a mistake, little brother." Ronan stepped forward, his tone cold. "And you're making one right now." The air was thick with unspoken challenge, the kind that only blood and instincts could create. Seren stepped back, jaw tight. "I didn't come here for this." "Then why did you come here?" Kieran asked, eyes sharp as glass. She hesitated, only for a heartbeat. "To remind you both that I'm not a pawn in your pack games." And then she turned and walked away. Kieran didn't stop her, but his eyes followed her until she disappeared down the hall, the echo of her scent still haunting the room long after she was gone. Ronan exhaled slowly, trying to steady his pulse. "Don't," he warned softly. Kieran finally looked at him. "You can mark her, Ronan, bind her, hide her, but you can't protect her from me." And when he left the hall, the silence that followed felt like the start of a war. Seren didn't remember the drive back to the safe house. Just the sound of rain on the windshield and the faint trace of Kieran's scent still clinging to her clothes. Sharp, commanding, impossible to forget. It was infuriating. She shouldn't have gone to him. She shouldn't have even looked at him. But part of her had wanted to, needed to. Like some instinct buried deep under her skin wanted to see if the rumors about the Alpha King were true. If he really could make the air itself bend when he walked into a room. He could. And it terrified her that she liked it. She dropped her jacket onto the table, tugged her hair loose from its braid, and stared at the faint crescent mark on her collarbone in the mirror. Ronan's mark. It had never faded, not once. No matter how many times she wished it would. The door creaked open behind her. Seren, Ronan's voice, softer than Kieran's, but laced with that quiet authority that made Omegas turn their heads. She didn't move. "You shouldn't have brought me there." He stepped into the dim light, rain still glistening on his dark hair, his jaw tense. "You think I didn't know that? Then why?" she asked sharply, finally turning. "You knew he'd smell me. You knew what that would do." "I had no choice," Ronan said, voice low. "He's been questioning my control. He wanted proof that my bond holds." Her chest tightened. "So I was your proof?" His silence was the only answer she needed. She laughed bitterly, though it sounded closer to a sob. "You really are his brother." Ronan's eyes flickered with guilt, but he didn't step closer. "It's not like that, Seren." "Then what is it like?" she snapped. "You mark me. You disappear. Then you drag me in front of your Alpha King brother like a trophy to prove you can keep your Omega in line. Tell me, Ronan, how exactly am I supposed to believe that's not the same thing?" He flinched. "Because I didn't mark you out of power," he whispered. "I did it to keep you alive." The words hit her like ice water. "What?" Ronan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You don't understand what happens to unmated Omegas in his pack, Seren. The king's laws, the rogues, the trafficking rings. I couldn't let them take you. So I marked me," she finished softly. Without asking, his throat worked. "Yes." The silence that followed was suffocating. Thunder rolled in the distance. Seren looked down at her shaking hands. She hated that she could still feel his bond hum faintly through her skin, like a chain of warmth she didn't ask for. "I don't want to belong to anyone," she said finally. Voice trembling, Ronan stepped closer, his expression torn between guilt and longing. "You never did. You never will." But he stopped himself, jaw clenching. "But he what?" she demanded. Ronan met her eyes, and something dark flickered there. "Kieran isn't like me. He doesn't care about permission, and he already wants you." Serene's breath caught. The words were like a spark in a dry forest. And suddenly, every memory of Kieran's gaze, his voice, his scent, ignited all at once. She turned away quickly, pretending not to care. "Let him try. You think you can resist him?" Ronan said quietly. "I think," she whispered. "He's not used to hearing the word no." The next morning, Kieran stood by the window of his office, a cigarette burning between his fingers as he reviewed the security reports. He hadn't slept, not because of work, but because every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. The defiant Omega with the broken bond and eyes that refused to lower. There were hundreds of Omegas in his pack, but none had ever defied an Alpha's scent the way she did. None had ever made his control falter. Ronan walked in without knocking. "We need to talk." Kieran didn't turn. "You should knock before entering a king's office." "Don't start," Ronan muttered. Kieran finally faced him, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have brought her here." "I know. And yet you did." Ronan met his gaze. "Because if I didn't, you'd have found her yourself." Kieran smiled faintly, sharp and humorless. "You think I need your help to find what's mine?" "She's not yours." Kieran's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. The subtle shift of dominance that made Ronan's shoulders tense. Kieran took a slow drag of his cigarette, exhaling smoke between his words. "You really think a mark will stop me?" Ronan's hands clenched. "If you go near her, you'll what?" Ronan's silence was the only answer. Kieran flicked the cigarette into the ashtray and stepped closer. "You can't protect her from me. Not forever." Ronan's jaw tightened. "Maybe not. But I'll die trying." Kieran studied him, not angry, not amused, just cold. "Then you'd better start preparing for that." Seren didn't plan on seeing Kieran again. But fate, or maybe the twisted laws of pack hierarchy, didn't care about her plans. By the end of the week, her phone buzzed with a summons. Mandatory pack assembly. Attendance required. Her pulse jumped. Pack assemblies meant one thing: the Alpha King's presence. Ronan didn't argue when she told him she was going. He just looked at her too long, eyes full of something between warning and guilt. "Stay quiet," he murmured. "Stay invisible," she almost laughed. "I've never been good at either." The assembly was held in the Vale Tower's grand atrium. Glass walls, steel beams, and the constant hum of dominance that radiated from every alpha in the room. When Kieran entered, the air shifted instantly. Power rolled off him like heat. Silent, heavy, impossible to ignore. He moved to the raised platform at the front, flanked by guards, his dark suit tailored to perfection. Seren tried not to look, but her instincts betrayed her. Her body reacted before her brain did, heartbeat quickening, scent spiking faintly, and he noticed. Of course he did. Kieran's gaze swept over the crowd and stopped the moment it found her. Seren froze. Every nerve in her body went still under that stare. He didn't look away, not even when one of his advisors whispered something to him. It was like he could smell her from across the room. The meeting began, but she didn't hear a single word. Her focus was locked on the Alpha King's calm, predatory poise, the way his voice slid through the hall like smoke, commanding obedience without effort. When the crowd dispersed an hour later, she moved fast, hoping to blend into the exit flow, until a guard stepped into her path. "Miss Dusk," he said stiffly. "The king would like a word." Her stomach dropped. "Now?" "Now." The private office Kieran stood behind a glass desk, city lights glowing faintly behind him. The skyline reflected in his eyes, all sharp edges and shadow. He didn't look up right away. "You ignored my call." "I wasn't aware I had to answer every alpha who decides I'm worth his attention," Seren replied coolly. Finally, he looked at her. "You're not just any Omega, you're his." "Correction," she said, stepping closer. "I was marked by him. I was never his." He tilted his head slightly. "You're brave when you should be careful." "I'm tired of being careful." That got his attention. For a moment, the mask slipped, the faintest flicker of interest, curiosity, hunger. He walked around the desk, slow and deliberate, until he was standing just inches away. "You smell like you're lying," Seren's breath caught. "And you smell like arrogance." A low chuckle left him, dark, unexpected. "You're either the bravest Omega I've ever met, or the most foolish." Her chin lifted. "Maybe both." Kieran's gaze lingered on the faint mark at her collarbone, Ronan's mark, and something dangerous sparked behind his eyes. "Tell me something," he said softly. "When he marked you, did you want it?" Seren's pulse jumped. "That's none of your business." "It is if you're standing in my pack, breathing my air. You don't own me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Not yet." Her heart stuttered. Every instinct screamed to step back, but she couldn't. His scent, his presence, the way the air seemed to hum between them. It pulled her in like gravity. Then, mercifully, the door opened. Ronan's voice broke the tension. "Am I interrupting something?" Kieran didn't turn. "Always." Seren exhaled slowly, forcing herself to step back. Ronan's eyes flicked between them, sharp with suspicion. "She doesn't answer to you, Kieran." Kieran smiled faintly, his tone edged with venom. "Then maybe that's the problem." Ronan moved closer, his own alpha scent rising in challenge. "Don't test me." "Careful, brother," Kieran murmured, his gaze flicking toward Seren. "You might not like what happens when you lose control." Ronan's jaw clenched. "And you might not like what happens if you touch her again." Seren's voice finally cut through their rising dominance. "Enough. Both of you." The silence that followed was tight as wire. Kieran's eyes lingered on her one last time. Slow, deliberate, like a silent promise. Then he turned back toward the window. "You can leave." Ronan grabbed her hand before she could move, protective, possessive, and pulled her out of the office. But even when the door shut behind them, she could still feel Kieran's gaze on her skin, like a claim he hadn't yet spoken aloud. Sleep didn't come easily to Seren that night. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw him, the way Kieran had looked at her, like he could smell every secret she'd ever tried to bury. Like her defiance amused him, but her fear excited him more. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands gripping the sheets, trying to steady her breathing. She told herself it was just scent confusion. An alpha's dominance could mess with an omega's instincts. That was all it was. Except it wasn't. Because the memory of his voice still lingered, low and deliberate. Not yet. It wasn't just words. It was a promise she could feel beneath her skin. Her bond mark pulsed faintly, reacting to it. Ronan's mark, burning in warning. Across the city, Kieran was having his own restless night. He'd dismissed his guards, shut the curtains, and poured himself a glass of whiskey. But the drink did nothing to dull the edge of what he was feeling. No Omega had ever unsettled him. No scent had ever reached under his control the way hers did, sweet, sharp, fractured. It wasn't submission he smelled from her. It was resistance, and it called to something primal inside him. He stood by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, and whispered her name to the empty room. Seren. The sound of it alone made his pulse quicken. He hated that. He didn't want her. Not the way alphas wanted their mates. He wanted her because she was off limits, because she belonged to the one person he'd sworn never to touch. And yet, every part of him wanted to break that rule. The next morning, the world seemed quieter. Deceptively so. Seren forced herself to return to work at the archives, pretending things were normal. She was halfway through cataloging old pack records when she felt it. That shift in the air again. That pulse. She didn't have to turn to know who had entered the room. Kieran Vale didn't announce himself. His scent did it for him. Deep spice, cedar, something electric that made her pulse skip. She froze, pen still in hand. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he murmured, stepping closer. Ronan warned you to stay out of my reach, didn't he? She turned to face him, jaw tight. You really enjoy pushing people, don't you? I don't push, he said quietly. I uncover? Uncover what? He studied her, eyes sharp but unreadable. Why you flinch when he touches you? Why his mark never settled? Her breath caught. You don't know what you're talking about. He smiled faintly. Don't I? Her hands clenched around the edge of the table. What do you want from me? For once, he didn't have an immediate answer. Instead, he reached out, slowly, and touched the edge of a glass file box near her. His fingers brushed hers by accident. The reaction was instant. Her scent spiked, instinctive and unbidden. Not submission, but raw awareness. His hand stilled. Her breath hitched. Neither of them moved for several seconds. The air between them was charged, humming like static. Then she whispered, You should leave. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't really want me to. Seren swallowed hard, her heartbeat betraying her. You don't know what I want. I know what you're afraid of. She glared up at him, forcing strength into her tone. You think you can just walk in here and... But she didn't finish, because he stepped closer. Close enough for her back to press against the edge of the table. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. Her lips parted. She couldn't. Not because she didn't want to, but because her voice refused to come out. He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then finally, he stepped back. Just enough for her to breathe again. When he spoke, his tone was controlled, but there was a faint tremor beneath it. You should stay away from me, Seren, because if you don't, I won't. He turned and left before she could respond, and she stood there trembling, half from anger, half from something far more dangerous. That evening Ronan found her sitting by the window of their apartment, staring at the city lights. You saw him again. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. Seren, he said softly. Please, whatever this thing is between you two, end it before it ruins you. She finally looked at him, eyes distant. You don't understand. He knelt beside her. Then make me. Her voice was quiet, almost breaking. "It's not something I can end. It's something that's already started." Ronan's expression hardened. "Then I'll stop him myself." Her gaze snapped toward him, sharp. "Don't. You'll only make it worse." He stood, shoulders tense. "He's my brother. I've been making things worse my whole life." When he left the room, she closed her eyes and finally admitted the truth she'd been denying for days. It wasn't fear she felt when Kieran was near. It was recognition. Kieran didn't go home that night. He ended up in the training hall, driving his fists into a punching bag until his knuckles split. The ache helped. The silence didn't. He'd spent years mastering control of his instincts, his temper, his power. But Seren Dusk had undone that in a matter of days. Her scent clung to him like smoke, impossible to shake. Her voice still echoed in his head. "You don't know what I want." He did. And that was the problem. He wanted her, not as an Omega, but as the one thing he couldn't have without destroying what was left of his family. When dawn broke, he was still there, hands raw, chest heaving. He stared at the blood on his knuckles and wondered if that's what desire truly was, a wound that refused to heal. Seren woke with a start, heart pounding, skin damp. She'd dreamt of him again. Not touching, not speaking, just standing too close. It wasn't a nightmare. That made it worse. She went to work early to avoid Ronan, but even as she walked through the rain-soaked streets, she could feel the phantom pull of the bond. Not Ronan's, his. Every Omega was taught the same thing. That scent confusion was temporary, a biological misfire easily corrected by distance. But what she felt for Kieran wasn't confusion. It was gravity, and the mark on her neck, Ronan's mark, was starting to ache, as if it knew. By noon, the archives were empty except for her. She liked it that way. The hum of old computers, the faint smell of ink and dust. It made the world quieter, until it wasn't. "Working early again?" Kieran's voice slid through the silence like a shadow. Seren froze. "Are you following me now?" He walked toward her slowly, the dim light catching the silver ring on his thumb. "If I were following you, you wouldn't notice." She glared at him. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said, "but neither of us seem to be good at doing what we should." She backed away a step, but he followed, not touching, just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. Her pulse jumped. "This isn't right," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "It isn't." Their eyes met and something shifted. That unspoken line between wanting and losing control blurred. He lifted his hand, slow and deliberate, until his fingers brushed the faint edge of Ronan's mark on her neck. Her breath caught. "Does it still burn?" he asked. She didn't answer. He leaned closer, his voice dark, quiet. "You smell like a storm trying not to break." Her hand shot up and gripped his wrist, not to push him away, but to keep him there. "I hate what you do to me," she whispered. "Good," he murmured. "So do I." The air between them snapped, charged, volatile, and dangerous. But before either of them could move, the door opened. Ronan. He froze in the doorway, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Kieran's hand near her throat. Her flushed face, their proximity. "What the hell is this?" Seren stepped back instantly. "It's not— Don't!" Ronan snapped, his voice rough. "Don't lie to me." Kieran's jaw tightened, but his tone was steady. "She didn't do anything." Ronan's gaze flicked to him, cold, furious. "No, you did. Like always." He turned to Seren, voice low. "We're done here." She stared at him, breath trembling. "Ronan, go home," he said. "Now." Kieran didn't move. He just watched her go, her scent fading down the hall, and knew something in all three of them had just fractured, and once it cracked, there would be no mending it. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Seren sat on the edge of the couch, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the city skyline through the rain-specked window. Her chest still burned from the near touch in the archives, and the memory of Kieran's hand lingering near her neck refused to fade. She hated herself for the way her body had reacted. She hated that even now. She could feel his presence inside her mind like smoke curling around her thoughts. She hated that Ronan's mark throbbed, almost as if warning her, reminding her that she already belonged to someone else. And yet, her pulse quickened with the thought of him. Not fear, not submission, but an undeniable magnetic pull that refused to obey logic. Ronan didn't sleep either. The moment he got home after work, he paced the apartment, fists clenched, scent sharp in the air. Kieran's audacity had crossed a line. Again. The sight of him touching her, so close, so intimate, had burned into his memory. He clenched his jaw. "I can't let him do this," he muttered to himself. "I won't." He had always protected her. Always. Yet every time Kieran was near, Ronan felt powerless. Not because Kieran was stronger, but because he wanted her in a way he couldn't allow himself to act on, and that made Ronan furious beyond reason. When he finally turned to her, sitting silently in the shadows, he saw her eyes rimmed with red, her lips slightly parted as if tasting a memory she didn't want to admit. "You saw him again," he said softly, voice low but controlled. She flinched but didn't speak. "You need to tell me everything," he pressed. "Now." Her hands gripped her knees. "I don't even know what to tell you." "Then start with the truth," he demanded. "How much of him do you feel?" Seren's throat tightened. She didn't want to admit it. Not to him. "Enough," she whispered finally. "Enough that I can't stop thinking about him. Enough that it scares me." Ronan's jaw tightened. "Damn it." He leaned down, resting his hands on his knees, his gaze heavy. "You're mine, Seren. You've always been mine. And I won't let him— Stop!" she snapped, standing suddenly. "You don't own me. Not even you. You can't stop him, and you can't stop me from feeling whatever this is." Ronan froze, the fire in her words cutting through the tension in a way he hadn't expected. "You don't get it," she continued, voice trembling. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for him, I didn't ask for you, but I feel both. And every time either of you is near me, it's like I'm being pulled apart." The room went silent. Ronan exhaled slowly, struggling to regain control. "Then I'll protect you," he said quietly, his voice taut with anger and something else, something softer, almost desperate. "You don't get it," she whispered again. "Protection doesn't help when it's him I'm drawn to." Ronan's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Then we'll figure it out," he said, jaw tight. "I'll make sure nothing happens to you, even if I have to destroy him." Her gaze flicked to the rain outside, to the city lights, to the faint glowing mark on her collarbone. Ronan's mark, hers forever, but not enough to keep her from feeling Kieran's pull. "I don't want anyone destroyed," she said softly. "I just want peace." Ronan's eyes softened just a fraction, but the tension in the room didn't ease, because both knew peace was impossible. Not with Kieran, not with each other, and not with the tangled bond she couldn't escape. And somewhere, far above the city skyline, Kieran waited, watching, knowing, patient. The city was quiet under the midnight rain, but inside Vale Tower, the tension was unbearable. Seren had been summoned, no explanation, no warning, just a command from Kieran. She hated being summoned. She hated the power he held, and yet, every step toward the towering glass doors made her pulse race. When she entered the office, Kieran was already there, leaning against the desk, dark and commanding. "Late," he murmured. "Not your concern," she shot back, voice sharper than she intended. He smiled faintly, an expression that made her skin heat and her mind scramble simultaneously. "Everything about you is my concern." Before she could respond, the door opened again. Ronan. His presence filled the room like a storm. Protective, furious, unyielding. "Enough," he said, voice low and dangerous. "You're not going to touch her again, Kieran." Kieran's eyes flicked to him, sharp, amused, and predatory. "And what if I do?" The room seemed to shrink around them, charged with the silent electricity of three wills colliding. Seren's pulse spiked. She could feel her Omega instincts twisting and turning, drawn between them. Ronan's scent screamed dominance, claiming her, steady and familiar. Kieran's scent called to the part of her that craved danger, challenge, desire. Ronan stepped closer, voice barely above a growl. "Back off." Kieran moved in response, not aggressive but deliberate. Close enough that Seren felt the heat radiating from him, her knees weak despite herself. "You can't control her," Kieran said softly, almost a whisper, "and I don't intend to try." "You already did," Ronan shot back. Serene's breath caught, and the room fell silent, not because of fear, but because everything had slowed. Time, sound, even thought, all drowned in the gravity between them. For the first time, Kieran's expression softened, just enough that it made her doubt everything. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, stepping slightly closer. "I'm already caught," she whispered, voice trembling. I can't choose." Ronan's hand went to her collarbone, brushing the edge of his mark, protective, grounding, possessive. "Then I'll choose for you if I must," he said. The air vibrated with unspoken promises, tension, and forbidden desire. Kieran's eyes narrowed. "You're mine as much as he is. You're not safe with either of us, and maybe you never will be." Serene's body betrayed her, responding to both scents, both dominance claims, both silent commands. Her pulse raced, her breath shallow. "Enough!" she finally yelled, pushing against both of them, trying to force clarity in the chaos. "I won't be a prize in your war." For the first time, Kieran and Ronan both stepped back, seeing her, truly seeing her, as her own person, defiant and alive. The room fell silent again. Kieran's gaze softened into something rare, almost private. "Then I'll wait," he said quietly, "but I won't give up." Ronan's jaw clenched, but he nodded slightly. "I'll protect you, no matter what." Seren exhaled, trembling. She didn't feel relief. She felt power, awareness, and the impossible truth. She was caught between two alphas, bound by instinct, loyalty, and desire. And there was no escaping it. As the rain drummed against the tower, the three of them stood in charged silence. No touches, no confessions, just recognition. The fire between them had ignited, slow, dark, and relentless. And nothing would ever be the same.